You are going to have to do better than that.
You are weak, human.
The Draxi soldier's hand was already closing around Ambassador Sarath's throat when Marcus Hale decided he had seen enough. He was supposed to be invisible. That was the assignment. Medical observer, non-combatant. Keep your head down and your mouth shut while the diplomats talk. 12 years in the Earth Defense Force had taught Marcus that the most dangerous thing a medic could do in a room full of armed aliens was remind them he existed. He had been very good at not existing up until this moment. The Concord Station's neutral hall smelled like recycled oxygen and old fear, the particular stale quality of a room where too many species had been too scared for too long. 6 circular tables, 11 delegations, and in the center, where the ancient Veth ambassador had been standing 3 seconds ago to read the formal petition for Earth's continued membership in the Galactic Accord, a 240-kilogram Draxi soldier was lifting a 4-foot-tall, silver-skinned alien off the floor by his windpipe. No one moved. That was the thing Marcus would remember later, the thing that would keep him awake on the transport home. No one moved. 57 representatives from 9 species, and not one of them took a single step. He understood why. He had read the Accord protocols 3 times during the shuttle ride over, because reading things was what Marcus did when he couldn't sleep, which was most nights since Karova. Article 14. Any armed intervention by a member species during a formal session automatically triggers a War Clause review. To act was to risk pulling 11 civilizations into open conflict. So, they watched. Sarath's feet left the floor. His long fingers, 6 per hand, jointed twice, scrabbled at the Draxi's armored forearm. His silver skin was going gray at the edges, the Veth equivalent of a human turning blue. He had maybe 90 seconds before unconsciousness. Marcus was already moving. Not running. Running made noise, made decisions visible. Marcus moved the way he had learned to move in the wreckage of Firebase Karova, where making noise meant dying, where the only survivors were the ones who learned to become part of the background until the exact moment they needed to stop being part of the background. He covered 20 feet in 4 seconds. Nobody saw him do it. The Draxi soldier, Varek's personal enforcer, Marcus had clocked him when the delegation entered. 6'4", dorsal armor plating, the kind built for open-field combat, not close quarters. Did not hear Marcus come up behind him. The first thing Marcus did was not a strike. It was a medical procedure. 3 years after Karova, alone in a base housing unit on Luna, while his entire squad was being buried in ceremonies he couldn't bring himself to attend, Marcus had read every xenobiology file the EDF had declassified. Not out of strategy, out of the specific kind of grief that needs somewhere to go. He had read about Veth respiratory systems and Keth bone density and Draxi neural architecture. He had read about how the Draxi secondary nerve cluster, the ganglion that regulated voluntary motor function in their upper limbs, sat exposed and unarmored at the back of the neck, a blind spot in their evolutionary history from a time before they had developed the dorsal plates. He had read this the way other people read about hobbies they'd never take up. He pressed 2 fingers into the precise location behind the Draxi's left ear. The enforcer's right arm dropped. Not all the way. Not a shutdown. Marcus hadn't pressed hard enough for that, hadn't wanted to, because shutting down a Draxi nervous system completely from the outside was a thing that could kill them, and Marcus was a medic first, always a medic first. But the arm went weak. The grip on Sarath's throat loosened by maybe 40%. Sarath dropped 3 inches, 3 inches was enough. The ambassador's feet touched the floor. His hands found the Draxi's loosened grip and pulled. The enforcer spun. He was fast. Faster than Marcus had calculated. The backhand caught Marcus across the left cheekbone and sent him sideways into the nearest table, scattering delicate water carafes and formal data slates across the polished floor. Something in Marcus's shoulder said something sharp and unpleasant. He registered it the way he registered most pain these days. Noted. Filed. Not relevant yet. The enforcer took 1 step toward him. Marcus was already up. Not all the way up. 1 knee on the ground, 1 hand braced. His left eye was already swelling. His shoulder was either bruised or something worse, and he was betting on worse. He looked up at 240 kilograms of armored alien who had just remembered that the small human had done something to his arm and was very unhappy about it. The room was still silent. 57 representatives, not one of them moving. Marcus looked at the enforcer's neck. Then he looked at Sarath, who had backed against the far wall, 1 hand pressed to his throat, silver eyes fixed on Marcus with an expression that Marcus couldn't read, because he didn't speak Veth body language well enough yet. But the eyes were tracking. The ambassador was conscious. That was the only data point that mattered right now. The enforcer reached down and grabbed Marcus by the collar of his EDF medical uniform. Marcus grabbed the enforcer's wrist with both hands. The left one screamed at him and did not let go. Article 14, Marcus said. His voice was very calm. He had practiced calm for 12 years. You're still in a formal session. If you drop me, this gets classified as an EDF response to a direct attack on personnel. That's a war clause trigger. He paused. If you put me down, it might still be a diplomatic incident. The enforcer stared at him. Marcus looked him in the eye and did not blink. I'm a medic, Marcus said. I just treated an injured party in a medical emergency. That's non-combatant action under Article 9. You can argue about it later. Somewhere across the room, a chair scraped. Lyrath, the young Veth interpreter, barely an adult by his species' reckoning, who had been sitting 2 seats from Ambassador Sarath all morning, whose hands Marcus had noticed shaking slightly since the Draxi delegation walked in, Lyrath was the first one to move, not toward the confrontation, toward the communications panel on the wall. His face was the color of old ash. The enforcer set Marcus down, not gently. Marcus's knees hit the floor and he stayed there for a moment, cataloging damage. Cheekbone, cracked, probably, not broken. Shoulder, dislocated, definitely. 3 ribs on the left side that had met the table edge at an angle that suggested they would have opinions about breathing for the next several weeks. The enforcer stepped back. His right arm was still hanging slightly lower than his left. At the far end of the hall, Commander Varek, head of the Draxi delegation, the one who had given the enforcer the order Marcus had seen pass between them in a look 30 seconds before this started, sat in his chair and watched Marcus get up off the floor. Varek had the face of someone who had just seen something unexpected and was deciding how much it bothered him. It bothered him. Marcus could tell because Varek's secondary eyelids, the transparent ones, the ones Draxi deployed when they were processing threat assessment, had closed halfway. Marcus stood up. He kept his right hand loose at his side. He let his left arm hang because lifting it was currently a project he wasn't ready to commit to. Ambassador Sarath, Marcus said, without looking away from Varek. Are you injured? A pause. Then, in careful, accented standard, I am standing, Sergeant Hale. That's not what I asked. Another pause. I am injured, not critically. I'm going to need to look at that. Marcus finally turned away from Varek. He walked across the hall toward Serath, each step measured, not rushing, the way you moved when you wanted everyone in the room to see that you were not afraid, even though your shoulder was on fire and your eye was swelling shut. He reached the ambassador and crouched slightly. Serath was 4 feet tall, Marcus was 6'1", there was always going to be a posture issue, and looked at the bruising forming on that silver neck. "Can you swallow?" Marcus asked quietly. "Yes." "Does it feel like anything's moving that shouldn't be?" "No." "Okay." Marcus glanced sideways at Lirath, who had reached the communications panel and was staring at Marcus with an expression that, in a human face, Marcus would have called stunned. "Is your interpreter injured?" Lirath shook his head, a gesture he had clearly learned from watching humans. "Good." Marcus straightened up. His shoulder reminded him very loudly that straightening up was an unreasonable demand. He ignored it. He turned to face the room. 57 representatives, 9 species, every eye in the hall on him. He was a 34-year-old sergeant from Louisville, Kentucky, with a dislocated shoulder and a face that was going to look like abstract art by tomorrow morning, standing in front of the most powerful diplomatic assembly in the known galaxy. "I'm going to need a medical kit," he said, "and someone should probably tell Admiral Chen what just happened before she hears it from someone else." From the Draxi side of the room, Commander Varek had not moved. His secondary eyelids were still half closed. His enforcer stood behind him now, right arm still subtly off balance, and both of them were looking at Marcus the way you look at something small that has just done something it had no business being able to do. Marcus had seen that look before. He was used to it. He was used to being underestimated. He had built an entire career out of being underestimated, and he was starting to think it might be the most useful thing about him. 3 seats over from Varek, a delegate from the Keth sovereignty, small, gray-green, with the compound eyes that never fully blinked, had moved one hand to the underside of their table. A slow movement, very controlled. Recording, Marcus guessed, or signaling. The second dangerous thing in the room, and it had been there since before the Draxi enforcer moved. Marcus filed it. He would think about it later. Right now, Serath needed ice, traction on whatever had been compressed in his neck, and someone to tell him that the next 6 hours were going to be significantly more complicated than this morning had suggested. The medical anteroom off the main hall was barely large enough for 2 humans. For a Veth ambassador, 1 human medic, 1 Veth interpreter, and 3 diplomatic security personnel who refused to leave, it was functionally impossible. Marcus made it work. He had set his own shoulder back into place in the supply closet adjacent. Alone. 30 seconds. 1 controlled breath. The specific kind of violence you do to yourself when you can't afford to wait for someone else to do it. And was now taping Serath's neck with a compression wrap designed for human anatomy but functional enough for Veth, given the structural similarities in cervical vertebrae that Marcus had, in fact, read about. Lirath stood against the wall, watching. "You knew," Lirath said. It wasn't an accusation. It was the tone of someone doing arithmetic. Marcus did not look up from the wrap. "Knew what?" "The nerve location. On the enforcer." Lirath paused. "That is not common knowledge, even among Draxi. I read a lot." Another pause. Lirath was quiet the way young people got quiet when they were deciding whether to believe something. "You read xenobiology files." "Among other things." "After Korova." Marcus's hands did not stop moving. He did not let them stop. "After Korova," he agreed. The name landed in the room the way it always did, with weight and with the particular silence of people who knew what it meant. The Battle of Korova had been 3 years ago. A Draxi incursion on a disputed moon. 44 EDF personnel. Marcus had been the only one to come home, and he had come home because he had hidden in a collapsed med bay for 11 days and done nothing useful, which was the thing he had told exactly no one, but which he thought about every morning when he woke up. He secured the end of the wrap and sat back on his heels. "Ambassador," he said, "I need you to tell me what Varek was signaling before his enforcer moved." Sarath's silver eyes found him. Up close, Veth's eyes were extraordinary. No pupil, no iris, just a single luminous silver field that somehow still managed to convey direction and focus, like looking into a mirror that had opinions. "He was not signaling," Sarath said carefully. "He was." A long pause. "Sergeant Hale." Sarath's voice was very measured, the way voices got when someone was deciding how honest to be. The Draxi delegation came to this session with a specific objective. It was not to listen to my petition. What was the objective? To ensure the petition was never completed. Marcus looked at him. "An unfinished petition," Sarath continued, "is not a failed petition. It is a tabled matter. The Accord rules require a tabled matter to be reviewed by the full council before it can be resubmitted. Review takes 4 months minimum. And Earth's provisional membership expires in 11 weeks. Marcus absorbed this. Outside the anteroom, through the closed door, he could hear the sound of the main hall in organized chaos. Raised voices in 6 languages. The particular frequency of diplomatic personnel trying to be very controlled about something that was not at all controlled. "So if the petition doesn't finish today," he said, "Earth gets tabled, the membership expires, and the Accord loses jurisdiction over any Draxi action in systems where Earth currently has protection." "Yes." "And Varek walks out of here having accomplished his objective through an incident that technically, if his enforcer stands by the medical emergency argument, never happened." "That is the structure of it." Marcus stood up. His ribs delivered their opinion again. He acknowledged it. "Lyrith," he said, "what's the status of the session? Has it been formally suspended?" The young interpreter pulled a data slate from his jacket. Council chair called a recess. 40 minutes. After that, the session either resumes or it's formally tabled. 40 minutes. Marcus checked his internal clock. The habit of a soldier. The thing you never stopped doing even after the fighting was theoretically over. 37 minutes now. The petition was 70% complete when Varek's enforcer moved, Sarath said. "I need approximately 8 minutes to finish the formal reading." "Can someone else read it?" A pause that told Marcus the answer before Sarath spoke it. Under Accord protocol, a petition for continued membership must be read by the petitioning party's senior diplomatic representative. There are no proxies. 8 minutes, 37 minutes to get back into that hall. Sarath injured, able to speak, but with a compression wrap around his neck, and the kind of bruising that was going to keep coloring in for the next hour. Commander Varek and his enforcer on the other side of a closed door, almost certainly in contact with whatever Draxi assets were aboard this station. The Keth delegate with their hand under the table. And Admiral Chen, who Marcus had still not contacted, who was going to receive the automated incident report any minute now, and whose first response was going to be to invoke EDF intervention protocols, which, if she did it before the session resumed, would look exactly like the War Clause trigger that Varric wanted it to look like. 2 threats, both accelerating. "Lirith," Marcus said, "I need a direct line to EDF command, not through station comms. Private channel, my personnel code." Lirith looked at him. "I can arrange that. But Sergeant Hale, why?" "Because I need to ask Admiral Chen not to do something before she does it." He paused. "Also, I need you to tell me everything you know about the Keth delegate in Seat 11. Lirath's expression shifted. Something behind those silver eyes recalibrated. "You noticed that?" "The hand movement." "Yes." "Delegate Keth Soren has been voting against Earth's membership for 2 sessions. Lirath hesitated. "But 3 weeks ago, the Keth sovereignty lost a mining station to a Draxi incursion. A station that was inside Accord-protected space." He paused. "If Earth is removed from the Accord, the protected space boundaries redraw. Keth Soren's home system falls outside the new boundary. So Varric is here to remove Earth, but in doing so he'd also be cutting the Keth out of their protection." "Yes. And Keth Soren knows this." "I believe so." "Then Keth Soren is not signaling the Draxi. They're signaling someone else." Marcus thought about this for exactly 3 seconds. Who else is in that room who has something to lose if Varric gets what he wants today? Lirath went quiet. Then, quietly, "Most of them." "Right." Marcus moved toward the door. "Then we have work to do." He stopped with his hand on the door panel. "Ambassador Sarath." He didn't turn around. The Veth stood with Earth in 2041, when every other species in this accord voted to classify us as a pre-contact liability and leave us out. I read the session transcripts. You were the only vote in our favor. You called us. He paused, pulling the phrasing from memory. You called us a species still becoming what they will be. You said that was reason to include us, not exclude us. Silence. "You were right," Marcus said. "And I'm very aware that you didn't know me when you made that decision, that it wasn't personal." "No," Sarath said, "it was not." "That's fine. I'm making it personal now." Marcus pushed the door open. "Give me 30 minutes." He walked out into the chaos. The hall had reorganized itself in the way of diplomatic emergencies, everyone in motion, no one visibly panicking, which was the same as panicking but with better posture. Marcus tracked across the room using the paths created by people who were looking in the opposite direction, which was a skill, like most of his skills, that he had learned somewhere he preferred not to think about. He found the Keth delegate's aide by the water station, refilling a carafe with the concentrated focus of someone who was absolutely not thinking about something. "Excuse me," Marcus said. He kept his voice low and absolutely pleasant. The voice he used when someone's leg had just been blown off and he needed them to stay still. "I wonder if I could ask you something." The aide looked at him, small, gray-green, compound eyes full of facets. "I don't speak for Delegate Keth Soren," the aide said. "I know. I'm not asking you to." Marcus set his hands on the table beside the carafe, both of them visible, a gesture he had learned meant something different to Keth than to humans, something closer to openness. "I'm asking if your delegate would be open to a conversation in the next 20 minutes that might change how they see the vote. The delegate has made their position clear. Positions change when situations change." He paused. "Especially when the person who created the situation is planning to use the outcome against the very people who voted his way. The aide was very still. "I have no authority to—" "I know," Marcus said again. "But you can carry a message. And the message is this: the Veth ambassador is able to complete his petition. The question is whether there are enough votes to pass it when he does. Delegate Keth Soren might want to think about what happens to Keth-protected space if the answer is no." He picked up his water glass. "That's all. Thank you for your time." He walked away. He had 26 minutes left. In his jacket pocket, his comm unit was vibrating. Admiral Chen's code, 3 times now. The pattern she used when she was being patient and running out of patience at the same speed. He found a quiet corner behind a support column and opened the channel. "Sergeant Hale," Admiral Chen's voice was the temperature of deep space. "I am looking at an automated incident report that describes you assaulting a Draxi diplomatic official." "I performed an emergency medical procedure on a foreign dignitary and sustained injuries as a result," Marcus said. Article 9. Marcus. "Admiral." A pause. He could hear her breathing, the particular measured cadence of a woman who had commanded 3 battle groups and had not yet found a situation she couldn't control, but was currently having a good try at finding one. "What do you need?" she said finally. "Do nothing for 25 minutes. That is a very specific request." "Yes, ma'am." "The Draxi have filed a counter-incident report citing unprovoked EDF aggression. That counter-report won't survive scrutiny once the full session recording is reviewed. There are 17 visual recorders in that hall, and at least 9 species delegations who watched Varek's enforcer grab the ambassador." He paused. "What the Draxi are counting on is that EDF responds before the session resumes. If we respond, Varek has his war clause trigger, the session gets formally suspended, and Earth's membership expires before anyone can stop it." A longer pause. 25 minutes, Admiral Chen said. "Yes, ma'am." "And if you can't do whatever you're planning to do in 25 minutes? Then you respond, and it's a mess regardless, so you haven't lost anything by waiting." "I've lost 25 minutes. Admiral Chen." He kept his voice very even. "The Veth stood with us when nobody else would. We owe them a debt. And Ambassador Sarath is currently sitting in a medical anteroom with a compression wrap around his neck because he came here to pay part of that debt on our behalf." He paused. 25 minutes. This time the pause was shorter. 25 minutes, Sergeant. Don't make me regret it." The channel closed. Marcus put his comm away. His shoulder had made a new sound when he raised his arm to hold the device. Not a good sound. He turned around. Commander Varek was standing 6 feet away. Not his enforcer. Varek himself, 7 feet of Draxi's senior command, with the kind of stillness that very large things had when they were deciding whether to move. He had the dark, overlapping scale plates of a high-ranking military Draxi, and eyes that were the color of old iron. And he was looking at Marcus with an expression that might have been curiosity or might have been the thing that came before a decision. "Sergeant Hale," Varek said. His standard was flawless, better than Marcus's probably. "Commander Varek, you are a medical officer. Yes. You are not a diplomat, not a security officer, not a representative of any kind." Varek's secondary eyelids were fully open, fully processing. "You have no formal authority in this hall." "No," Marcus agreed. "Then what you did today, the interference, the contact with my personnel, the conversations I can see you have been having with other delegations." Varek's voice was very even. "None of it is authorized, None of it is your role. No, Marcus said again. Then why? It wasn't a question. It was the specific flatness of a commander who genuinely wanted to understand a decision. Marcus looked at him for a moment. Because nobody else was doing it, he said. Varek studied him. The iron eyes moved across Marcus's face with the careful attention of someone reading a document in a language they are mostly fluent in. You understand, Varek said slowly, that what happens today, regardless of outcome, is not finished. Earth's position in this accord is contested. That does not end in a single session. I know. You are one man, a sergeant, with a dislocated shoulder and facial trauma, and no formal standing in these proceedings. Varek paused. You cannot change the structural reality of Earth's situation by being inconveniently brave in a single afternoon. Probably not, Marcus said. Then what are you doing? Marcus thought about this for a moment. Not performing thinking, actually doing it. He thought about Karava and 11 days in a ruined medbay and the 43 names he could still recite in order. He thought about Sarath's silver eyes and the transcript from 2041, and the phrase, a species still becoming what they will be. He thought about Chen on the other end of a comm line, holding herself back by pure will. My job, Marcus said finally. I'm doing my job. He walked past Varek toward the main hall entrance. Behind him, he heard no footsteps. Varek did not follow. But Marcus had the distinct and specific sense. The same sense that had kept him alive in places far more dangerous than a diplomatic station. That something had shifted behind him. He didn't look back. 21 minutes. The session resumed with 19 minutes to spare. It resumed because Delegate Keth Soren walked back into the hall 8 minutes after Marcus's conversation with their aide, sat in their chair, and placed their recording device in the visible position on the table. The Keth equivalent of a public declaration of witness. 11 other delegates did the same thing within the next 4 minutes. Not all of them for the same reason. Marcus hadn't had time to talk to all of them, and he was under no illusions about having persuaded anyone of anything. What he had done was make it sufficiently clear that the events of this session were being watched, documented, and would be reviewed, and that being on the wrong side of the documentation was a category of problem that lasted longer than a single vote. It was enough. Ambassador Sarath walked back into the hall with a compression wrap under his diplomatic robes and his head held at the precise angle of someone who had calculated the maximum height achievable without aggravating cervical trauma. He was extraordinary. Marcus watched from the observer's position along the side wall. Non-voting, non-diplomatic. Technically, not even supposed to be standing given his listed status as injured personnel, and thought that he had never seen anything quite as stubbornly dignified as a 4-foot alien who had recently been choked into near unconsciousness reading a formal petition for humanity's right to exist in the galactic community. Sarath read for 8 minutes and 14 seconds. His voice did not waver. When the petition concluded, the hall was very quiet. Then Delegate Keth Soren pressed their vote pad. Green. Then 3 others. Then 4 more. Then, in the kind of cascade that happens when people who have already decided something finally see a safe moment to show it. 7 more in the space of 30 seconds. 11-4 in favor of continued membership. Earth stayed. Marcus let out a breath he had been holding in different ways for approximately 4 hours. Then Varek's enforcer moved, not toward Sarath, toward the communications panel on the far wall. the station broadcast relay that connected to every vessel in the docking ring. Marcus was across the room. Too far. He saw the Enforcer's hand go into his jacket and come out with a device that was not a standard Draxi comm unit, and his brain said biological payload before his body had fully decided to respond, because Marcus had read files on Draxi coercive diplomacy instruments too, late nights on Luna, because reading was what grief looked like when it had nowhere else to go. A Draxi dispersal canister, atmospheric release, 6-minute deploy cycle. The effects on Veth physiology specifically were... Marcus did not finish the thought. He was running. Not the measured, invisible movement of before. Running. Full sprint. The kind that reminded every damaged rib exactly where it was and what it thought about this decision. His left shoulder caught someone's chair, and he felt the joint pull in a direction it had only recently agreed to stop pulling in. He kept going. The Enforcer reached the panel. The canister hit the wall panel first. And Marcus hit the Enforcer 3 seconds later, full body weight, 187 pounds of EDF medic, carrying every pound of momentum he'd built in 20 feet of sprint, which was not 240 pounds of Draxi, but which made up for the difference in mass by arriving without warning from an angle the Enforcer had not been watching. They went into the wall together. The impact was loud enough that Marcus felt it in his teeth. The Enforcer's elbow connected with Marcus's left side, the exact side where 3 ribs had already filed grievances, and the pain was the color white. A full second of nothing but white, and then it faded to the kind of red that meant functioning. Keep going. The canister bounced off the wall panel and hit the floor. 6-minute deploy. It needed to be activated. The activator was in the Enforcer's right hand, the same hand that Marcus had affected earlier, the hand that was still less responsive than the left. Marcus grabbed the Enforcer's right wrist. The Enforcer was stronger, significantly. This was not a contest Marcus could win on leverage or mass. He knew this. He had known it when he was running across the room. He had known it because he had already thought about what he would do when the strength difference made itself felt. He bent the Enforcer's wrist outward at the specific angle where the Draxi secondary flexor tendon ran closest to the surface. Not a break, a compromise. Enough to make the hand open. The activator fell. Marcus caught it with his right hand. He could do that. His right hand still worked. He held it. The Enforcer's left hand closed on Marcus's collar and lifted him. Not off the floor entirely. He got 1 foot under himself, barely. But enough that breathing was a discussion rather than a certainty. "Put it down," the Enforcer said. The first words he'd spoken all day. "No," Marcus said. "Put it down, and I release you." "No." The Enforcer's grip tightened. Marcus looked across the room. Lyrath had the sense to be behind a table. Sarath was being moved by his own security detail toward the sealed exit. Good. That was the right call. The council chair was reaching for the emergency lockdown panel. Most of the delegates had backed toward walls with the collective instinct of people who understood, on a cellular level, that staying in the center of the room was a poor decision. Commander Varric had not moved from his seat. He was watching Marcus with an expression that Marcus couldn't name. Not what he expected from a man whose plan was dissolving in real time. Something older. Something that had nothing to do with today's session. The Enforcer's grip tightened again. Marcus's vision was narrowing at the edges. He was aware of this with the specific clarity of someone who had been in worse situations and was using the experience not to panic. He kept his right hand closed around the activator. He kept his feet on the floor. He did not drop the activator. He did not drop it. The lockdown panel activated. 6 blast doors dropped simultaneously. The sound of it was enormous. The Concorde station's emergency protocol triggering on every exit point in the main hall, sealing the room from the docking ring. The locks engaged with a series of mechanical impacts that each sounded like a decision. The Enforcer's grip went briefly loose. Surprise reflex. The primitive part of the brain saying loud noise, large movement, assess. And Marcus took the moment. He dropped his weight instead of fighting it. All of it. Knees going, using gravity instead of strength. The Enforcer's grip pulled up, and Marcus's body went down, and the two forces canceled each other in a way that put Marcus on the floor, but free of the grip. He rolled. His ribs screamed. He put the activator behind him, against the base of the wall, and turned back toward the Enforcer, who was coming down toward him with the full mass of 240 kilograms and the very reasonable plan to just pin a 187-pound human to the floor and hold him there until someone else dealt with the situation. The Enforcer's hand came down. Marcus caught the wrist with both hands. Both of them, left shoulder burning, the joint making a sound that he was going to be deeply concerned about later, and turned the arm against the secondary flexor tendon location again, harder this time, the way you did a thing when you could not afford to do it halfway. The Enforcer went down to one knee. Not all the way, but one knee. That was enough. In the Draxi military hierarchy, one knee to a human was not a gesture. It was a category error. It was something that did not have a protocol because it did not have a precedent. The room was absolutely silent. Marcus was on the floor. The Enforcer was on one knee above him. Both of them were still. Marcus looked at Commander Varric. Varric was standing now. He had risen from his chair at some point, and Marcus had not seen it happen. He stood at the edge of the Draxi delegation area, secondary eyelids fully closed. Not in threat assessment, Marcus realized. In something else. Something he didn't have a name for in Draxi behavioral science, because it wasn't in the files. "This is done," Marcus said. He was speaking to the Enforcer but looking at Varric. "The canister is on the floor behind me. The activator is secured. The session has concluded with a valid vote." He paused. "This is done." The Enforcer did not move for a long moment. Then he stood. He stepped back. He did not retrieve the canister. Marcus got up from the floor. He did it slowly. There was no performance left in him, no calculation of how it would look, just the practical business of getting a body with 3 cracked ribs and a questionable shoulder vertical. It took longer than he would have liked. When he was standing, he looked at Varric again. Varric looked back at him. The secondary eyelids were still closed. Or rather, Marcus realized, they were almost closed. Not all the way. "Commander Varric," Marcus said, "I'm going to report this incident as a malfunction of a diplomatic equipment piece that was discharged accidentally by personnel and secured without deployment." He paused. "That is what I'm going to say happened." Varric was very still. "The vote stands," Marcus said. "Earth stays in the accord. But so does the Draxi delegation, if that's what you want." He held Varric's gaze. "What happened in this room today doesn't have to be the beginning of something worse. That decision is yours." He bent down, carefully, with great economy of movement, and picked up the dispersal canister. He carried it to the council chair's security station. He set it on the desk. He stepped back. His left arm fell to his side. He let it. Across the room, Lirath had come out from behind the table. The young Veth interpreter was staring at Marcus, with the specific expression of someone who has just watched something they are going to have to spend a long time figuring out what to do with. Sarath, at the sealed exit with his security detail, had turned back to watch. The 4 Draxi delegates who had voted against Earth's membership were in a cluster near their table. None of them were looking at Marcus. They were all looking at Varric. Varric looked at Marcus for another long moment. Then he sat back down. His secondary eyelids opened fully. It was not agreement. It was not a concession in any language Marcus knew. But it was a pause, the specific pause of a commander who has decided that the engagement is over for now, and who will take the time to understand why before deciding what comes next. That was enough. Marcus walked to the wall and slid down it until he was sitting on the floor. He put his right hand over his ribs. He breathed carefully. Lyrath appeared beside him. "You should be in the medical station," Lyrath said. "Yeah," Marcus said. "Probably. I will take you. In a minute." He looked up at the sealed hall, at the 11 species who had just watched a human sergeant fight a Draxi enforcer twice his mass with a dislocated shoulder and win on a technicality and a neural pressure point. He looked at Sarath, who was looking back. He looked at Varric, who was talking very quietly to his delegation. He thought about Karava, about 11 days, about 43 names. "Lyrath," he said, "what's the Veth phrase for 'we're even'?" A pause. "There is no direct equivalent. The closest concept is Veth Sarael. Roughly, the debt lives in both directions now." "Veth Sarael," Marcus repeated. "Yes. Is that something you say after someone does something for you, or before?" "It is said," Lyrath answered slowly, "when both parties understand that what happened between them cannot be measured in a way that allows for an account to be settled, when it has become something other than a debt." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. "Okay," he said. "That's a good phrase." The blast doors opened 40 minutes later. Marcus spent most of those 40 minutes on the floor, which he told himself was a tactical decision about not aggravating the ribs, and not at all about the fact that standing up required more energy than he currently had access to. Lyrath sat beside him. At some point, someone brought a field medical kit from the station's emergency cache, and Lyrath, with the careful precision of someone who had read a lot of human first aid documentation but never applied it, began doing competent work on Marcus's cheekbone. "You don't have to do that," Marcus said. "You would say that," Lyrath said, and kept going. When the blast doors opened, the station's emergency response team came through first. Concord Station's own security, not affiliated with any species delegation, 6 personnel in the gray and white of Interstellar Neutral Service. They secured the canister. They took statements from the council chair. They photographed the dispersal device and logged it. Then Admiral Chen walked in. Not virtually. In person, which meant she had been aboard the station the entire time, which meant she had been close enough to intervene from the moment Marcus called her, which meant the 25 minutes she had given him had been a genuine choice, not a limitation. Marcus had not known she was aboard. He looked at her from the floor. She looked at him. "On your feet, Sergeant," she said. "Working on it, Admiral." She crossed the room in 9 steps and stood over him with her hands behind her back and looked at his face with the expression of a person cataloging damage. Cheekbone? Cracked. Shoulder? Was dislocated. Reset. Ribs? 3. Left side. You reset a dislocated shoulder yourself. In the supply closet, yes, ma'am. Chen looked at him for another moment. Then she looked at Sarath, who had moved back into the room when the blast doors opened and was standing 10 feet away with his security detail and his compression wrap and his absolutely unreadable silver eyes. "Ambassador Sarath," Chen said, "EDF extends its formal apologies for the circumstances of today's session." "The circumstances were not of your creation, Admiral." Sarath's voice was still slightly roughened. "Your sergeant was the reason this session concluded at all. The Earth Defense Force has nothing to apologize for." Chen looked back at Marcus. Marcus said nothing. "Get up," she said, but her voice was different now. Not a command, something closer to the sound of an order given to cover something the speaker doesn't want visible on her face. He got up. Lirath helped, one hand under Marcus's right arm, careful of the left. He made it. "The vote result is valid," Chen said to the room. "I've already filed the confirmation with the Accord Secretariat. Earth's membership is extended for a full standard cycle, pending the next formal review." She paused. "The dispersal device is now in Concord security custody and will be subject to Accord Weapons Protocol review." Another pause, this one aimed with precision at the Draxi delegation. "The EDF does not intend to pursue additional action at this time regarding the session's events." The second sentence landed in the room the way a piece of news lands when it says something different on the surface than it says underneath. "The EDF does not intend to pursue additional action at this time," which meant we have everything documented. We are keeping it, and the word "at this time" is doing a great deal of careful work in that sentence. Commander Varric, sitting at his delegation table, absorbed this without visible reaction. Then he stood. He walked across the room. He stopped in front of Marcus. He was very tall up close. Marcus had noticed this before, but it was different now. Standing, with the bulk of the Draxi commander directly in front of him, the physical fact of the size difference was significant in a way that Marcus usually managed to ignore, and was finding slightly harder to ignore at this particular moment, with 3 cracked ribs and a shoulder making complaints about the morning's activities. Varric looked at him. Marcus looked back. "Sergeant Hale," Varric said, "I want to ask you something." "All right." "At Korova." Varric's voice was very low. Not private, exactly. The room could still hear, but directed, careful. "You survived?" "Yes." "How?" The question was not what Marcus expected. He took a moment with it. "I hid," he said. "I hid in a ruined medical bay for 11 days, and I was the only one who came home. And that's the whole story. That is what the record says." Varric studied him. "The record does not say what you did in 11 days in a ruined medical bay." Marcus held his gaze. "I read." A pause. "You studied Draxi anatomy," Varric said, "from captured medical files. Field files from the engagement zone." "Yes." "For 11 days." "Yes." "And you have been reading since." "Yes." Varric was quiet for a moment. His secondary eyelids moved. Not the assessment close of before, something else, something Marcus would have said in a human face, looked like a decision arriving. "Why did you protect the Veth ambassador?" Not how. Why? Marcus thought about Lirath's phrase, Veth Sariel. The debt lives in both directions now. "Because in 2041, Marcus said, when this accord was deciding whether to classify humanity as a threat or a member, when every calculation pointed toward leaving us out, one species voted for us. Not because we deserved it. Not because we'd proven anything. Because they thought we might be worth what we hadn't become yet. He paused. I think that's the only kind of faith that matters. Faith in what something could be, not what it is. Varek looked at him for a long moment. The Draxi, he said slowly, do not operate from faith. We operate from evidence. I know. You gave us evidence today. I was trying to keep a diplomatic session from being derailed. That is not the evidence I mean. Varek's secondary eyelids closed halfway, and this time Marcus had a name for it, because he had been watching Varek's face all day, and he could read the gradations now. It was the expression Varek made when he was deciding to say something true. I have been in military command for 31 years. I have faced humans in 3 engagements. I assessed your species as I assessed the data. Average physical parameters, short lifespan, inconsistent decision-making under stress. A pause. The data was correct. It was also incomplete. We tend to be, Marcus said. What I observed today was not in the data. Varek's voice was measured. A human who studied our biology from files taken during a war that killed everyone he knew, and did not use that knowledge for revenge, and did not use it for advantage, and used it today to prevent a diplomatic incident becoming a slaughter, and then offered the aggressor a way to step back without losing face. Varek paused. That is not the behavior pattern I modeled for your species. We're working on it, Marcus said. Something moved behind Varek's iron eyes. Not warmth. That was a category Marcus didn't want to impose on a species he'd known for 4 hours, but something that might, with 30 years and a different set of circumstances, become the foundations of something like respect. The dispersal canister, Varek said, was not my order. The room was very quiet. My enforcer acted on standing doctrine from a previous engagement briefing that I did not rescind before this session. I am responsible for that failure of command. Varek held Marcus's gaze. I want you to know this. Marcus considered this for a moment. I'll note it, he said, in my incident report. Thank you. Varek turned and walked back to his delegation. At the medical station doorway, Admiral Chen was looking at Marcus with an expression that she would never describe as proud, but which was, if he was being precise about it, the closest thing he'd seen on her face to that category. He did not say anything about it. She did not say anything about it. Lirath appeared at Marcus's shoulder. Ambassador Serarath would like to speak with you, he said quietly, before you go to the medical station. Tell him I'll come to him. They walked, Marcus slowly, Lirath matching the pace, across the hall to where Serarath stood with his security detail. The ambassador's neck bruising had deepened in the time since Marcus had wrapped it. It was going to be significant by tomorrow. But his posture was the same as it had been at the podium. Sergeant Hale, Serarath said. Ambassador. Serarath looked at him for a long moment with those mirror-field eyes. Veth Sarael, he said. Marcus felt something in his chest that was not a rib. Lirath told me you asked about that phrase, Serarath said. I want you to understand what it means when I say it. He paused. It does not mean the debt is settled. It means the debt has become something else. Something that does not need to be settled because it has become the foundation of something new. He paused again. 41 years ago, I voted for a species I had never met, in a session where everyone else voted against them. I did not know Marcus Hale. I did not know Korova. I did not know what humans would become. He looked at Marcus steadily. Today I know one human, and I begin to understand what we were waiting for. Marcus was quiet for a moment, "We're still becoming," he said. "Yes," Sarath said. "That is exactly what I mean." 3 months later, Marcus was back on Luna. Not in the housing unit this time. The housing unit had been reassigned when he was cleared for active duty, which had happened 6 weeks after the Concord Station incident. Once the shoulder had finished its strong opinions about the events of that day and settled into merely having opinions. He was in the EDF Medical Corps Administrative Building, which had slightly better coffee and significantly worse chairs, and he was waiting outside Admiral Chen's office for the 3rd time this week. The door opened. Chen was looking at a data slate. She gestured without looking up. He went in. "Sit down," she said. He sat. She put the slate on the desk and looked at him. "The Accord Secretariat sent a formal commendation for your actions at Concord Station." "I heard." "The Keth Sovereignty sent a separate communication through diplomatic channels requesting that Earth recommend you for the Interspecies Liaison Medical Program." "I heard that too. It's a 2-year posting, rotating between 6 species medical facilities. You'd be the first human in the program." "Yes, ma'am." Chen looked at him steadily. "You don't seem surprised by any of this." "I try not to be surprised by things that make sense." She was quiet for a moment. "Then, the Veth have formally added Earth to their Veth-Sariel covenant. Lirath explained it to me. The mutual debt that becomes a foundation." She paused. "No other non-Veth species has ever been included in that covenant." Marcus said nothing. "That was your doing," Chen said. "Ambassador Sarath's doing," Marcus said. "I just showed up." "You showed up with 3 cracked ribs and a dislocated shoulder, and no formal authority, and kept a diplomatic session from becoming an interspecies incident." "I was doing my job." "Marcus," Chen's voice shifted. The same shift from the blast door moment. The shift he had learned to recognize as the sound she made when she was going to say something true. "You have spent 3 years since Korova reading files alone in a housing unit, learning, being ready for something. And you have never once said out loud that you were being ready for something." He looked at the desk. "You're not going to start now, are you?" she said. "No, ma'am." She let out a breath that might have been a sigh in a different woman. "The liaison posting is yours if you want it. It also comes with a promotion." She slid a data slate across the desk. "Lieutenant?" He picked it up. He looked at it for a long moment. He thought about 43 names. He thought about 11 days. He thought about the specific shape of grief that needs somewhere to go and finds, eventually, if you're patient with it, a place where it becomes something else. Not healed, not over. Something that has become the foundation of something new. "Yes," he said. What Marcus did not know, what he would not learn until 6 weeks after his arrival at the Veth Medical Station for his first liaison rotation, was that in the 3 months since Concord Station, Commander Varek had done something that no Draxi commander had done in 40 years of engagement history with the Accord. He had filed a formal review request for Draxi engagement doctrine in human-inhabited systems. Not a surrender. Not a concession. A review. The specific, methodical, evidence-based reconsideration that Draxi command structure allowed for when new data invalidated a previous model. The review would take 14 months. It would involve 46 sessions with Accord mediators and 3 Draxi military councils. It would eventually result in a restructuring of Draxi threat assessment protocols that reclassified humanity from pre-contact liability to unpredictable peer, which was not warm exactly, but which in Draxi relational taxonomy was the category just below trusted trading partner, and which was the fastest movement along that scale that any species had achieved in Draxi history. Varek had cited one incident, one set of data points, one sergeant. Subject demonstrated capability significantly exceeding modeled parameters, the review request read. Specifically, used acquired biological knowledge under extreme physical duress to de-escalate, not escalate. Sustained significant injury while maintaining strategic restraint. Offered aggressor withdrawal path that preserved command structure integrity. Behavior pattern inconsistent with prior species-level threat assessment. Recommend full protocol review. In the notes section, in Varek's own handwriting rather than the standard dictation system, he had added one sentence: "We were looking at the wrong data." At the Veth medical station, Marcus learned that Lyrath had applied for the diplomatic training track. He also learned that Ambassador Sarath had, in the weeks after Concord Station, done something that no Veth ambassador had done in the Accord's 80-year history: submitted a formal proposal to the Accord Educational Council for a shared xenobiology curriculum, open to all member species, with mandatory cross-species practicum rotations. The proposal cited the Concord Station incident as its rationale. Specifically, it cited the documented fact that a human medic's 3-year study of Draxi physiology, conducted informally, in grief, from declassified files that had never been intended as diplomatic tools, had prevented what would have been the worst interspecies incident in Accord history. What stopped this, Sarath had written, was knowledge held across a boundary that most believed should remain closed. We do not suggest that shared knowledge guarantees peace. We suggest that it makes peace possible in moments when nothing else does. The curriculum proposal passed with 14 votes in favor. The Draxi delegation abstained. That was the fastest any proposal had moved through the Accord Council in 30 years, and the abstention was the first time in 40 years that a Draxi delegation had not voted against a measure proposed by the Veth. Small things, quiet things. The kind of things that don't make the records immediately and show up only later, when someone is counting what changed and trying to find the moment it started. Marcus spent his first week at the Veth medical station learning their triage system, which was elegant and deeply counterintuitive, and made him rethink 3 things he had believed about trauma care since medical school. He spent his second week teaching a Veth medical team how to treat a human in cardiac arrest, which was apparently something they had not had a protocol for, because humans had not previously been patients at Veth facilities. He spent his third week in a quiet room with a window that looked out at a Veth orbital garden. Trees that grew in 0G spirals, silver-barked, with leaves that were the same luminous color as Sarath's eyes, and red. He was reading Veth biological chemistry because there were things about Veth cellular repair mechanisms that he didn't understand, and he wanted to. He was good at reading. He was good at patience. He was good, it turned out, at being ready for things. On the 22nd day, he got a message from Lyrath. The ambassador says you are well. Are you well? He wrote back, getting there. Then he added, Veth Sarael. Lyrath's response came 11 minutes later, which was fast for interstellar comms, which meant Lyrath had been waiting for the message. Yes, Lyrath wrote, that is exactly what it is. Outside the Accord Council's historical record room, in the hall that listed the membership votes for every species admitted to the Accord since its founding, there was a small plaque. All membership votes were recorded there. Species name, date, vote count. Earth's original 2041 entry was listed as 110. 1 vote in favor, 10 against. Earth's 2091 continuation vote from the Concord Station session was listed as 11-4. The Historical Record Office had, without fanfare and without announcement, added a notation to the 2091 entry. Not an explanation, not a narrative, just a cross-reference, the way archives cross-referenced related events. The notation read, "See also, Concord Station Incident, Standard Date 2091.04.17, Non-Diplomatic Personnel, Medical Action, Article 9. That was all." It was enough. In the 40 years of Accord membership votes since 2091, Earth's vote count would go from 11 to unanimous, a progression that no analyst had modeled and no diplomat had predicted, and that happened the way most real changes happen. Not in the dramatic moment, but in the accumulation of smaller moments, each one turning something over slightly. Until one day, the aggregate weight of all that turning was enough to move the whole. But that was later. Right now, Marcus was at a window in a Veth medical station, reading about cellular repair mechanisms he didn't understand, in the particular piece of a man who has found the right shape for his grief. He was becoming. He was good at that too. I keep coming back to the supply closet. The moment Marcus goes in alone, sets his own shoulder, and comes back out without telling anyone. And the story just moves on. No one sees it. No one acknowledges it. It doesn't make anything easier for him. He just does it and keeps going, because the work is still there and someone has to do it. That's the thing that stuck with me writing this one. Not the fight, not the vote, the supply closet. Here's what I'm genuinely curious about. If you were Varric, if you'd spent 30 years modeling a species as a manageable threat, and then watched one of them do what Marcus did, not to defeat you, but to give you a way to step back, what would that do to the model you'd built? If this one left you thinking, I'd like to know what you took away from it in the comments. No wrong answers. This one felt open to me,